Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Steven's going to be teaching you a beautiful etude for classical ukulele. Now, I don't want to go too much into details on the composition or the composer because Steven's going to be doing just that in the intro of his lesson, and you definitely want to stick around because he's going to share a hilarious story about the composer himself. Now, I will say this is a really great piece for those of you who are wanting to get into classical style of playing. And there's a couple things that make it ideal for, I would say, the seasoned beginner, or those of you who are just starting out playing this style. The first one of which is that it uses a three-finger approach for fingerpicking throughout the entire piece. Now, this three-finger approach, Steven's going to be covering that in the intro of his lesson. Now, the second thing is that the rhythm stays constant pretty much throughout the entire thing. So every single bar is almost an identical rhythm that you're going to be playing. And again, Steven's going to be covering that as well. So those two elements, they really make it very beginner friendly. So let's talk just a little bit about the lesson. So in this video, you guys are going to be learning the entire etude. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, you can do so by clicking this link, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for Etude in E minor. Now, also on that page will be the on-screen tab viewer. So this is a really cool feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a great asset in learning this song that much easier. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Steven to teach you how to play this, and then I'll see you at the end of the lesson.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this lesson on Etude in E minor, but in A minor. We've called it Etude in E minor because that's the name of the original guitar piece, but to be able to play this using the open tuning of the ukulele, we'll actually be playing it in A minor. So this is a piece from Francisco Tárrega, who is widely regarded as the father of modern classical guitar technique. Now, I played a lot of classical guitar in my younger years, and Tárrega was just always one of my favourites. I just felt his compositions just had something really special about them. They're technically very challenging, but just musically exceptional, just total masterpieces in my opinion. Now, this piece we're going to learn today isn't one of his sort of technically challenging masterpieces, you'll be glad to hear, but rather just a sort of musical study, which is pretty much what etude translates to. This is essentially a technical exercise in arpeggio picking, but it also sort of demonstrates how a melody can be extracted from a simple repeating arpeggio picking pattern over some basic chords. Now, Tárrega wrote many of these etudes over the years, and although they're just sort of technical exercises, he always set out to make them worthwhile pieces of music in their own right. And I think that's certainly true of this piece. You can really hear that haunting and wistful melody coming through on the A string throughout this piece. Now, Tárrega himself was a pretty serious dude. He set himself a rigorous daily practice regime consisting of improvising before breakfast. Before he even had his cornflakes, he was improvising. Then after breakfast, he spent all morning working on arpeggios and scales, and then all afternoon he'll be working on kind of transcribing and composing. Now, I play a lot of ukulele, but that is some serious dedication. And he also insisted on musical accuracy to the point where he actually split up with his lover and duet partner after she simplified quite complex fingering of his guitar fingering. I know, oh no she didn't. Tárrega was quoted at the time as saying, "I'd have preferred a knife stabbed in my heart than a note taken from my music." Pretty intense. But then I suppose to be one of the very best in any field, we can't really get there without a certain level of intensity. But I think for the rest of us mere mortals, I think it's fine just to be a little bit more chilled and just play for the fun of it. So let's do that. So this piece we're going to look at is fairly simple to play. It does require a bit of competence with right hand picking. And there is a little bit of movement up and down the neck, and some of the left hand shapes are a little bit stretchy, but the whole thing is played at quite a slow tempo, so there's plenty of time to think about our fingerings and think about our transitions, which is a big help. So due to its kind of relative simplicity, it allows us to think about how we can emphasize melodic shaping and phrasing in this tune. So to do that, we're going to think about 3 performance concepts. Those are rubato, vibrato, and dynamics. And we have looked at these recently. If you did the Spanish Romance lesson not very long ago, I went over all these concepts in quite a lot of detail. So I won't go over them all again right here. But if you didn't do that lesson, or if you did, and you wouldn't mind a refresher, then feel free to go back and watch that intro. I probably recommend that you do watch that intro to that lesson, where ever so slightly younger me explains all these in a lot of detail. However, if you're happy with all those and you don't need to do that, then feel free to keep watching and we'll get into this tune. Okay, so just a note on that, if you were to go back and watch this Spanish Romance lesson intro, there is a link just in the description box below that will take you straight to that lesson. So just the intro, watch that, where I talk about these 3 techniques. So this piece has 2 sections, an A and a B section, and we're playing with an A-A-B-B structure. So we play the A section through twice, and then we play the B section through twice. And we're playing in 3/4 time, so we have our 3 quarter notes to the bar. But rhythmically, really, this piece is very straightforward because we're essentially just playing these repeating 8th note triplets throughout the entire piece. The only time we actually deviate from that is at the end of each section. So we don't even need to think about the rhythm really when we're playing this, but if you do want to know more about 8th note triplets, Andrew has a whole in-depth lesson on these, so there's a link in the description box below there that will take you to his lesson all about 8th note triplets if you want to know more. But for the purposes of this lesson, we're probably okay with the idea that we're just playing these repeating kind of triplet arpeggios, which I'll explain a little bit more now, because you're thinking, well, what's an arpeggio? Well, all that really is the notes of a chord played separately rather than all together. So if we had a chord like a G7, for example, normally we'd play all those notes together, just strum that chord, that's our chord there. But the notes of that chord, if we were to separate those out and play them individually in an ascending or descending order, that makes it an arpeggio. Simple as that. So an arpeggio is just the notes of a chord played individually in an ascending or descending order. Now there's probably a lot more depth you can go into about arpeggios, but that's enough for now. That's just a basic introduction to what they are. That's all we need for the purposes of this lesson. So to play these triplet arpeggios, what we're going to do is just use a very, very simple right hand picking pattern. We only need the first 3 strings, the A, the E and the C. We're not going to use the G string at all in this piece. You've noticed this is a low G string on here. That's not significant, that's not important, don't worry about that. This can be played on high G or a low G uke because we're not using the G string at all. So what's going to happen is our ring finger is going to take the A string, our middle finger is going to take the E string, and then the index finger is going to take the C string. And we're just going to pick the A, the E, and the C in that descending order, and just repeat that. Okay, so that's it. That's the picking pattern for the entire piece, apart from those 2 measures that end each section. So really important that we're okay with that, familiar and happy with that, because it's our entire sort of rhythm and picking pattern for this piece of music. So if we think about 1 measure from this piece, what we're essentially going to do is play 3 of those triplets per measure. So the A string takes the beat, so each time we're playing the A string, the start of a new triplet, that's the next beat. So for example, we'd have 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet. Okay, so 3 triplets per measure. So it's really important that these triplets that we're playing are flowing smoothly. We have kind of equally spaced notes and that they're sounding good and flowing nicely. Okay, so if you're happy with that and that works, you're proficient with finger picking and that's fine for you, that's great, let's move on, let's go forward. But if you find that a little bit tricky and it's a bit kind of jerky and doesn't sound quite right, then take a moment, just stop the video here, there's no rush with this. Make sure that you're competent and comfortable with that right hand picking pattern, because as I said before, this entire piece is based on that pattern, and you'll find this whole piece so much more rewarding and enjoyable to play and to learn if you've got that down, because once you've got that down, that's the rhythm covered, it's the right hand covered, you won't have to think about any of that, and it allows us then to concentrate on what the left hand is doing and think about this melodic shaping and phrasing of the tune to really make our performance stand out and be something really quite special. Okay, so take a moment if you need to, just practice that and just do it on open strings to begin with, just to get that sequence, equally spaced notes, all flowing quite nicely. And then feel free just to throw in some random A string melody notes. Just to practice that coordination between the right and left hand. Doesn't matter what those notes are, just totally random. Okay, so once that's feeling good, sounding good and flowing nicely, then we're ready to move on. So the last thing I want to mention before we get stuck into learning this piece is just about the melody. So once we've mastered this piece and we're playing it, we want that melody to really pop and be kind of quite prominent, because that's what the whole piece is about. Yes, it's a technical exercise in arpeggio picking, but there's a melody there, it's been put there on purpose, so we want to hear it, we want that to come through. But that's fairly simple to achieve with this piece, because the entire melody for this piece is all played on the beat on the A string. So another way to think about that is the start of each triplet. When we play that A string, that is the melody. And the melody note is played on that A string, on the beat, all the way through. So all we really need to do is, with our triplet picking, all we have to do is just pick that A string a little bit louder. So the start of each new triplet, when we're back to that A string, that's the melody note. We just pick that note a little bit harder. So you can hear that melody, that A string being just a little bit louder than the rest. So if we just pick that a little bit harder and then pick the next two, the E and the C string, a little bit softer, that A string melody is going to pop all the way through. Okay, so it's worth making sure that you know what you're listening for. So that melody that we want to hear, what I would do is just have a go at playing it and stripping out the rest of all that arpeggio picking, the rest of those triplets. Just play the A string melody in isolation. And if we do that for the A section, it should sound something like this. Okay, so that was just the A section there, but I'd recommend doing that for the B section as well, just so you know what that melody line is and what you're listening for when you're playing this piece. Okay, so by now we should have all the tools that we need to learn this piece, so let's get into it. So let's start with the A section. We'll look at measures 1 and 2 together first of all. So for these two measures, like I mentioned before, we're just playing these repeating triplets. So we're essentially going to play 6 repeating triplets for these two measures, measures 1 and 2. We're going to start on an A minor chord, but we're not actually holding anything because we're not using the G string. So we're just going to play open strings. So the first measure, or the first triplet of measure 1, super easy because we're just on open strings. And what we're going to do is we're going to play the A string first, then the E string, then the C string, because that's just our triplet pattern all the way through. That's our descending arpeggio of that chord. So beat 1, we just have that triplet. Then what we're going to do on beat 2, we're going to play the next triplet. We're going to add the pinky to the A string at the 3rd fret. Use the pinky here because what we want to do is we're always thinking about what's coming next. Whenever we think about our fingering, we're thinking about, right, what works now, but what's going to work better when we go to the next shape shortly after. And for this piece, the pinky there works best because we're going to go to a G7 shape after it, which we need these fingers free for. So on beat 2, we're going to hit that A string at the 3rd fret and just play that descending arpeggio once more. Same sequence. And then for beat 3, we just hold that and we play that again. Okay, so that's measure 1, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now in terms of these kind of melodic shaping techniques, like rubato, vibrato and dynamics. For these first two measures, I'm not going to use any of those here. We're just going to play this at a kind of mid-level volume because we might want to get a bit louder later on. We might want to go a bit quieter. We'll start with just like a standard normal kind of playing volume, but I'm not going to speed up or slow down for this. But these are just the first two measures. We're just getting into the piece. We don't want to go too soon with these techniques. We don't want to overuse them either. They're just little subtle changes in tempo and volume, just to kind of add some expression to the piece, but we want to keep it tasteful. We don't want to be using it for the sake of it. So these first two measures, I probably wouldn't put any of those techniques in here. So measure one is just that. Okay, then into measure two, again, just 3 repeating triplets, same right hand pattern. What we're going to do now, we're going to leave that pinky on there, on the A string at the 3rd, but then we're going to add our G7 shape on behind it, and we'll put the whole G7 shape on, even though we're not going to be playing that note. Actually, we're not going to do that. Here's another thing I've mentioned. We've mentioned vibrato, rubato and dynamics to death. We've talked about them. You've probably watched the Spanish Romance intro again. You're familiar with those. But something else that's really important for this piece, with it being quite slow and quite kind of stripped back, is the idea of sustain. We really want every note that we're picking to be ringing out for as long as possible before we cut it off. And that's really important for this piece to get that kind of just feel that we want. So once we've played the final triplet in measure 1, that, we don't want to throw that whole G7 chord on, because if we do, it's going to cut those 2 open strings that are ringing, those last 2 notes of measure 1. We don't want to cut those 2 soon. We want to ring. So what we'll do, to keep the idea of sustain in mind and keeping notes ringing as long as possible, what we'll do at the start of measure 2, on beat 1, we'll play that A string at the 3rd because that's what the note is. But then we'll build up the G7 chord as we progress through this measure. So after beat 1, the next part of the triplet is the E string at the 1st. So we'll just put that note on just in time to play it, and then complete this triplet by playing the C string at the 2nd fret, but we'll just put that on just in time to play it. Okay, so that first triplet of measure 2, and this is now a G7 suspended 4 shape that we're holding, but we're going to build that up slowly like I said. So the first triplet would be, and if you watch this hand here, you see these fingers go on just in time to play those notes, which allows the open ringing sound to continue from the previous measure for as long as possible. So if I play measure 1 and then just that first triplet of measure 2, we would have, okay, and you see those go on just at the last minute, just in the nick of time. Okay, so then continuing into measure 2, the 2nd triplet of measure 2, we're going to drop the melody now down to the 2nd fret on the A string. So the 3rd finger here, which is all ready to complete the G7 chord, is going to go on. Pinky will come off. Again, just in the nick of time to play it. And then we'll play 2 repeating G7 triplet arpeggios. It's all getting a bit crazy, isn't it? So what we're going to do, A string, E string, C string, same pattern, just play that twice. And that completes measure 2. Okay, so measure 2 altogether. Brill. Okay, so I'll play measures 1 and 2 again, and then we'll have a go at playing them together, but I'll just play them for you first of all. And what I'll do as well is I'll just try and pick out that A string just a little bit louder. So remember, the melody that we want here is, without that little extra E string there, that's my dodgy picking. Okay, so that's what we want to hear coming through, so make sure that we're picking that A string a little bit louder. Okay, that's what we're after. So we'll play those 2 together now. Slower than that, we'll play them a little bit slower, so let's have a go at doing that now. 1, 2, 3. on to measures 3 and 4. Again, same picking pattern, same rhythm. We're just playing these repeating triplets. What we're going to do now, we've finished measure 2 on this G7 chord. This is where we were. We're going to turn this into a version of an E7 chord next. But again, we want to think about sustain. We want to think about building the chord up as we play the notes rather than just switching straight to it and having that kind of nasty transition when everything's not flowing and ringing as it should. So from here, what we're going to do is the first note of measure 3 is the E string at the 5th fret. Now ideally, if you can stretch the pinky up to that 5th fret, the 3rd finger can come off because we don't need that one. So if that's staying on makes the stretch hard, that can come off so the hand can kind of stretch up a little bit. If you can, leave those 2 fingers on. That is a bit of a stretch. That is a bit stretchy, that. But if you can leave those 2 on, that's ideal because they're going to still be ringing out from the end of measure 2. And we want to let them do that if we can. So measure 3, beat 1 is this 5th fret. Okay, the next part of this triplet for beat 1 is the E string at the 4th fret. So this 3rd finger that we've let come off the A string as we've put the pinky on, this now is going to reach over and take E string at the 4th, and as we're doing that, ideally we'd let this C string at the 2nd stay on, but that gets a bit too stretchy and difficult. So as we move this 3rd finger to the E string at the 4th, it's okay to let that 2nd finger come off. As we pick that E string at the 4th, the middle part of our first triplet, what we'll do is we'll bring the 1st finger up to take over and play the C string at the 2nd with the 1st finger like that. So by the time we get to the end of our first triplet and we're playing that C string at the 2nd, we're holding this E7 shape like this. Pinky at the A string at the 5th, 3rd finger here, E string at the 4th, and then the 1st finger there on the C string at the 2nd. Okay, so from that G7 we've gone. Do that a bit slower, watch this hand here. So then on to the 2nd triplet of measure 3, we now want to take our melody note down to the A string at the 3rd fret. So we'll leave these 2 on, the 1st finger and the 3rd finger can stay on because we'll need those. They're going to complete the arpeggio in a second. The pinky there will come off, we'll drop that down onto the A string at the 3rd and then play that triplet. That's our 2nd triplet there, beat 2. And then on beat 3, the final triplet of this measure, we now want to drop the melody note just another note down, or another fret down to the 2nd fret on the A string. But again, these 2 want to stay planted because, well, we're going to play them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 1st finger and we're going to do a bar across those top 3 strings, all 3 strings. It's already holding the C string at the 2nd, so we'll leave it on there, but just flatten it down, take that 2nd finger off. So we're holding this shape, the 1st finger's barring across all 3 strings at the 2nd fret. This 3rd finger is still on from the whole measure so far on the E string at the 4th, and then we play that final triplet, 2, 4, 2. Okay, so that measure all together, you can hear it all ringing out, all sustaining. Those 2 fingers are staying on the whole time, ringing out nicely. We're just descending that melody line from the 5th to the 3rd to the 2nd. And just changing that melody note just in the nick of time when we need to play it so it's ringing for as long as possible. We're not playing it and cutting it off, we're letting it ring. So from here, that's a little bit stretchy and a bit hard. Doing that bar there is quite tricky, but it's only short. We're holding it on for 1 triplet, then we're letting it come off. So practice that measure. That's probably one of the trickiest measures of the whole piece for me. So once we've done that, we're on to measure 4, and we're going to go back to an A minor shape, but a different version of it now up to the 7th fret. So from here, again, we want to let that last triplet of measure 3, there it is, ring for as long as possible. So again, if we can, what we will do is we'll stretch the pinky up to the 7th fret, trying to keep that on if we can, and only take it off once we've played that first note of measure 4, that A string at the 7th. Okay, so as we play it, just as we're about to play the open E string, we can take that shape off. And again, that's a bit of a stretch. If you can't do that, it's okay, but it will just sound better if you can leave it on to allow that sustain, let the strings ring for as long as possible. So measure 3 into that first triplet of measure 4, we would have... measure 4 there, but it's just the same triplet repeated, so it's quite easy. Measure 4 once we're up to it. So again, if I play it a little bit slower, watch at the end of measure 3, this shape here, watch me keep that on for as long as possible as I stretch the pinky up. Just left it on too long there and I muted the E string. So I'll try that again. So in terms of measure 4 there, like I've just shown you, I won't go over it in loads of detail because it's dead easy. It's just those repeating triplets, 7, 0, 0, and again, and then a third time. Okay, so what we'll do here, in terms of these kind of melodic shaping techniques and phrasing, what we'll do is we will add a bit of vibrato here, and I would probably use some dynamics as well. When I play this, I'll tend to increase the volume a little bit here, pick these notes a little bit louder, and also add some vibrato on those 7th fret notes, because it's quite nice to do when you're just playing one note. It just, I don't know, 7th fret as well. When I'm at the 7th fret, I just want to play with vibrato, whatever I'm playing. I don't know why I need to get over that, it's a bit of an issue. But anyway, on this measure, we could do that. Give it that bit of vibrato and increase the volume a little bit there, a bit of drama, because, I don't know, we're up the neck a little bit and it's hard work getting there, so let's celebrate it with some volume, yeah? So a bit of drama, bit of vibrato, bit of increase in volume. Okay, and then I might even speed up a little bit. I might use a bit of rubato there and just speed up ever so slightly, but then towards the end of that measure, just slow it back down again, ready to go into measure 5. Okay, so measure 3 and 4 together, we'll have something like this. So that's how I've got it playing those two measures together now. 1, 2, 3. So once we've completed measure 4, we go into measure 5 and then 6 and then 7, but these are just repeats, so it's just like going back to the beginning. So measures 5, 6 and 7 are the same as 1, 2 and 3. So we'll play them again. But then instead of repeating measure 4 and going up to the 7th fret, we go to measure 8, which just completes this A section. And what we're going to do here, we're going to break that triplet picking pattern for the first time in this piece, and it's the only time we do it until the end of this B section. So what we do then is we just take everything off and we just play the open A string back to an A minor shape on beat 1. And then we don't play any triplets here, we just play on beat 1, let that ring for the entirety of beat 1. And then on beat 2, we're just going to play all 3 strings together, the A, the E and the C, at the 12th fret, and play them with a harmonic. Okay, so the way to do that is if you just take your 3rd finger, if you prefer a different finger, that's fine. I use the 3rd finger, and we just want to gently rest the kind of, the pad of the finger there across all 3 strings. And what we're going to do, we're going to pick upwards this time. We're going to go from the C through to the E through to the A and go in that order. Okay, now you could strum those, and you could use your thumb, bring the thumb into play. The thumb's bored, why not? If you fancy using the thumb, that's fine. I tend to do this kind of fast arpeggio pick in an ascending fashion there, up there. And the way to do it is just rest that finger really, really gently on top of the strings. And we're not fretting them, we're not putting them onto the fret, we're just keeping the strings open, we're just resting the skin of the finger, just gently touching, just use the senses of your finger, feel that touch. It's just, when you can just feel the strings touching your finger, that's how much we need, just a really light touch. And then as we play the string, we lift the finger off. But obviously what we want to do here is play 3 strings in a row. So we can't pick the first string, and then lift the finger off, because then it's not there for the other two. So the way I do this is I tend to kind of push the finger upwards, this third finger here, I kind of push it upwards slightly and then kind of roll it off from the top. Yeah, so when I do the C string, it's maybe not even touching the other two strings at this point because I don't need it to. I only need it to be contacting the C string because I'm starting with the C string. So what I might do is kind of do this kind of, I don't know if you can see that from that angle, but kind of up and in a kind of rolling fashion as I kind of, that was the 10th fret, like that. So up and over, just contacting the strings when I need to. And make sure the finger's directly over the fret wire. It doesn't want to be kind of behind like it would be if we were playing the note, directly over the fret wire. And just have a little experiment with your ukulele, because sometimes I find with certain ukes is that maybe just a tiny fraction ahead of the fret wire towards the 13th fret, just a tiny fraction over, is where the kind of sweet spot for that harmonic is. It's not always directly over, somewhere close. Just move it slightly and just move it round a little bit until you find that sweet spot for your uke. It might be directly over the 12th, but if it isn't, try moving it forward just a touch. You might find it just rings a bit better there. Okay, so that's on beat 2 of measure 8, and then we'll let that ring over beat 3, and that completes our A section. So I'll just play measure 7 and 8 for you, just so you can see how measure 8 kind of fits in with the rest of the piece and how we conclude this A section. So 7 and 8 together should sound like this. Okay, brilliant. So once we've done that, we finish measure 8. What we do is go back to the beginning, we play that whole A section once more, and that completes our kind of first part of this, the AA repeat. That's then done. So before we finish up, let's have a go at playing those measures 7 and 8 like I've just done there. Let's have a go at playing those together now. 1, 2, 3. So once we've played the A section through twice, we move on to the B section now. And again, we've got the same right hand picking pattern, the same rhythm, these repeating kind of triplet arpeggios that we're playing. So what we're going to do for measure 9, we're going to go back to an A minor chord, and we're going to play the first triplet the same as the A section. So we're going to go for the A, the E and the C, all open. That's our first triplet. And then on to beat 2, we're going to do the same as before. We're going to go to the 3rd fret on the A string, but this time we're going to use the 1st finger. When we played this in the A section, and we used the 4th finger because we were heading to a G7 chord afterwards, this time we're not. We're carrying on up the neck, so we want to use the 1st finger. So we've got these fingers free to stretch up to the 7th where we're going next. So beat 2, we play the A string at the 3rd with our 1st finger, play our usual triplet, and then up to the 7th fret we'll use the pinky for that one, and again leave that on for as long as possible. Just as you're about to play it, stick the pinky on, and then we're at the 7th fret for our final triplet of measure 9. So measure 9 there all together would be okay. And then into measure 10, what we're going to do is we're going to keep that pinky on. That stays there. We're going to play that again. Beat 1 of measure 10. Letting those two open strings from the end of measure 9 still ring. Just as we're about to play the next bit, which is the E string at the 5th fret, what we'll do is we'll put a little half bar, little hingy bar on over the E and the C strings, using our 1st finger for that, because we're now going to play those two strings next. Okay, so once we've played the 7th fret on beat 1, just in time for playing the next part of this triplet, we'll put that bar on and then play the rest of that triplet. Okay, brill. And then what we're going to do is take the pinky off, because now what we want to do is play the A string at the 5th fret. This is the melody, remember? All the melodies on the A string, so this drops now to the 5th fret. So take the pinky off, that bar is now across all 3 strings. We play those 3 strings descending from the A string. That's the next triplet of measure 10, and then the final triplet of measure 10. Again, we're just going to change the melody note, but this stays on because the rest of the triplets, the 5th fret's the same. So the pinky goes up to the 8th fret, and then we play that triplet there. Okay, so measure 10 is brill. So measures 9 and 10 together should sound like this. Now in terms of these sort of performance techniques, what we'll do here, usually it sounds quite good, but I think it's up to you. But for these 2 measures, what we'll do is we'll gradually get louder through these 2 measures and really increasing the volume and kind of sort of measure 10. And maybe just slowing it down and decreasing the volume there at the end of measure 10. Maybe at the start of measure 10 we use rubato and just speed up ever so slightly, just play them a tiny bit quicker, but so subtle. Remember, rubato is very, very subtle. These are not obvious changes. We're not playing really, really quick. We're just maybe playing with a little bit more urgency just to add some kind of expression to the piece. Okay, so as well as playing that little bit louder, we'll play a little bit quicker, but then slow it down again at the end of that measure 10. Remember with rubato is that it should all kind of even itself out. By the end of the piece, there should be no overall change in tempo. They're just subtle changes. The increases in speed should be balanced out by the decreases, and it all kind of ends up being the same speed overall by the end of the piece. So remember that it's subtle and we want to keep it balanced. So as we go through measure 10 into measure 10, we get a bit louder, maybe a tiny bit quicker, but then bring all that back at the end of measure 10, slow it down and quieten it back down. So let's have a go at playing those 2 measures without all those performance techniques, just for the sort of mechanics of it. Let's just play those measures nice and slowly through together now. 1, 2, 3. On to measure 11 now. We're going to go back down to first position and play a G7 chord, and our first triplet is just that G7 chord, the arpeggio of that. Play those first 3 notes, that's beat 1. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to add the pinky on to the 3rd fret on the A string. So keep the G7 chord held, let it all ring as always, but just add the pinky on. That's our new melody note, pick a little bit louder, and then complete the triplet over our G7 chord. That's beat 2. And now what we want to do here, again in the interest of letting those 2 last notes ring, the E and the C string, letting them ring, as we go into this 3rd triplet, which is just still a G7 chord, but we're just moving the melody note up. Let the pinky come up to the 5th fret, and again, bit of a stretch, see if you can. If this one comes off, that's fine, that's okay. Okay, so just keep those on if you can, stretch the pinky up, then play that note on beat 3. That's the E string. There we go. So that's beat 3, the start of this final triplet. And then as we come into the next note of this triplet, we want the E string at the 3rd fret. So after we've played that first note, the E string at the 5th, let this first finger now, the pressure can come off the C string with the 2nd finger. Let the first finger come up to the 3rd fret, just in time to pick it on that middle note of that final triplet. And then for the final note of measure 11, the final note of that last triplet, we want the C string at the 5th. So we'll use our 3rd finger, which is kind of in the right area there, and drop that on to finish off there. Okay, so I'll play that really slowly. Watch this hand so you can see the kind of transitions and what it's doing. So from the G7 chord, again, I delayed that a little bit too long, so I'll play that again. So you can hear everything's ringing for as long as possible. These notes aren't getting cut short, it's all just ringing continuously. Brill. Okay, so from here into measure 12, what we're going to do now is we're going to play that 5th fret again. So we're going to keep there the A string at the 5th, leave that finger on that pinky, pick it, and then after you've picked it, we'll take these 2 fingers off because we want to open those 2 strings up now for the rest of this first triplet. So beat 1 of measure 12 is that A string at the 5th. Take these 2 fingers off to play the open E and then the open C. Okay, and then from here, all we're going to do now is change the melody note on the A string. The E and the C stay open all the way through. So from here now, the second triplet of measure 12, we'll just drop this down the A string to the 3rd fret. So pinky off, 1st finger on, play that triplet. And then up to the 7th fret with the pinky and play 7 0 0, the final triplet. There we go. So that measure 12 was just smash in. So with measure 11 we would have lovely. I think those are my favourite 2 measures in the piece. Maybe the 2 before, 9 and 10. This kind of first part of this B section I think is just beautiful, really special. I love this little bit in particular. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll have a go at playing measures 11 and 12 through together there now. 1, 2, 3. So once we've played measure 12, we then move on to measures 13 and 14 and 15, but these are now just repeats of actually 16 as well. So the next 4 measures in the B section, the second half of the B section, is just the same as measures 5 to 8 from the A section. Okay, so we're just playing those again in exactly the same way. Okay, so then what we do is we repeat like before. We're playing the B section again, so we play it back to measure 9, we go all the way through again, but this time instead of just playing 16 at the end of the second run through, just to finish the whole piece off, because then that's the end of everything, we're just going to change that last measure from the open A harmonic to literally just play in the 3 strings together, just open, just an A minor chord on beat 1, letting that ring all the way through for the rest of that measure to finish it off. Okay, so the second time round we play the B section, and I'll show you this now. We'll do 15 and then 17, so measures 15 and 17 together. The end of the whole piece would sound like this. Just like that, okay. And again, like the A section, we'll probably just slow that down gradually as we're getting towards the end of that measure 15 into measure 17. We'll just slow the tempo down just to mark the end of that piece. Okay, so just to practice that, why not have a go at measures 15 and 17 together now? So just the end of this piece, let's have a go at doing them now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's it for this piece. I hope you like this piece anywhere near as much as what I do. I think this is a lovely piece of music, but what I like about it as well is that I really feel that it kind of bridges that kind of gap between beginner and intermediate. I think it's an accessible piece. It's not easy, but it's accessible to the beginner, even though there's some quite difficult bits in it. But in order to master it and really play it with kind of expression and panache and to get that kind of sustain happening all the way through, I think it really unlocks the door to kind of intermediate ukulele playing. And it's one of those pieces that I think you can learn well enough to begin with, but the more you practice it and the more you think about these techniques and let yourself think about sustain and fingering and only putting fingers on when you need to, these are things that really kind of unlock intermediate and advanced playing, because this is the kind of stuff that you need to be doing to play at those levels. So it's a really good piece for that. I think it just bridges that gap beautifully. Beginners can play it, intermediates can really play it, and it just allows you to keep developing those skills. I think what's important as well is, I've shown you some examples of where I might use vibrato and rubato and dynamics and all that. And there are probably certain people in the music world who have very set ideas about where they should be used in certain pieces, this one included, no doubt. But personally, for me, I think music is it's ours, it's our own thing. Yeah, we didn't write this piece, but we're playing it, we're performing it, and we're putting our spin on it. We're applying these techniques where we want them to be, because we're feeling it, we're in it, and we know when we want to speed up and slow down, when we want to increase the volume, because we're feeling the need for that. We're feeling this measure's got a bit of drama, I'm feeling the drama, I'm going to increase the volume. And I think that's okay. People might disagree, but I think it's absolutely fine for us to be using these performance techniques as and when we see fit. So I really want you to do that. Practice this piece. Don't see it as a boring piece, because it isn't. It's beautiful, and yes, it's fairly simple, but like I say, it's just a great piece for advancing your playing. And I really want you to feel it, be in the music, and just apply these techniques where you feel they should be. Okay, so I hope you've had fun with this one, and I will see you next time.
Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed learning this piece. It's a beautiful sounding classical tune that was very seasoned beginner friendly. So a really great one for those of you who are just getting into classical style playing. Now I did want to give you a friendly reminder that if you do want to get the tabs to print, keep for your records, that was available at this link, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com and do a search for Etude in E minor. Now also on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.